First, by way of restaurants, pubs, and bars. Then
How did Björn Andrésen pass away? The boy who once embodied beauty itself, the face that stopped time, is gone. On October 25th, 2025, the Swedish actor and musician known to the world as the most beautiful boy in the world died at the age of 70. No cause of death was revealed. No spectacle, no ceremony. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows a lifetime of being watched. Half a century earlier, his name had echoed through Cannes, Venice, and Tokyo. He was not just a star. He was an idea. A vision of beauty so pure, so untouchable, that it consumed the man behind it. Björn Andrésen never truly escaped the role that made him famous. He spent 50 years trying to reclaim the humanity that fame had stolen from him. In the end, he didn't die in a palace, or a scandal, or a spotlight. He died quietly, perhaps the only thing he ever wanted. But to understand how a boy turned into a myth, and a myth turned into a ghost, we have to go back to the frozen streets of Stockholm, back to a lonely child who never asked for the crown the world forced onto his head. Because the story of Björn Andrésen isn't just about beauty, it's about the price of it. Stockholm, 1955, a city of snow, silence, and survival. In one small apartment, a child was born, pale, quiet, unaware that the world would one day call him beautiful. His name was Björn Johan Andrésen. He would never know his father, and by the time he was 10, he would lose his mother too to suicide. No warning, no goodbye, just the echo of a door that never opened again. That moment carved the first crack in him, the one that beauty could never hide. After her death, Björn was taken in by his grandmother, a proud woman with strict manners and sharper ambitions. She wanted a celebrity in the family, he would later say. To her, the boy was not a child to protect, but a name to build. She took him to music classes, auditions, anywhere that could polish the grief into gold. He sang, he smiled, he learned how to stand under the lights without blinking, but something inside him stayed frozen. He could play the piano beautifully, yet the sound always felt sad, as if every note remembered his mother's absence. In photographs from those years, he looks delicate, almost unreal. The kind of face that the world would worship before it ever understood it. And then one day, fate, or something far crueler, answered his grandmother's wish. Because somewhere in Italy, a director was looking for a boy who looked like an angel and carried sorrow in his eyes. A boy who could make death look beautiful. That director's name was Luchino Visconti. It was 1970. Europe was rebuilding its soul, and cinema was trying to capture what remained of innocence. In Rome, the legendary Italian director Luchino Visconti, a perfectionist, aristocrat, and self-proclaimed aesthete, began searching for the face of an angel. He wanted someone who could make death seem divine, someone who could be loved, but never touched. Then he saw a photograph, a boy from Sweden, 15 years old, pale as porcelain, eyes that carried both youth and grief. When Björn Andrésen walked into that casting room, the world stopped breathing. Visconti didn't hesitate. This, he said to the press later, is the most beautiful boy in the world. It was supposed to be a compliment. Instead, it became a curse. The role was Tadzio, the ethereal boy in Death in Venice, the object of desire for an aging composer slowly dying by the sea. Björn didn't understand the film's darkness. Not yet. He thought he was playing a dream. But the camera didn't see a dream. It saw temptation, obsession, decay. During filming, Visconti treated him like a rare artifact, not a child. Every movement rehearsed, every glance measured. He once said he felt like an exotic animal in a cage. The world called it art. Björn called it survival. When the film wrapped, he was no longer a boy from Stockholm. He was Tadzio, the immortal face of death and desire. And immortality, as he would learn, is the cruelest illusion of all. Cannes, 1971. The red carpet glowed like fire. The Mediterranean breeze carried camera flashes, cigarette smoke, and the scent of obsession. And at the center of it all stood a boy who didn't know what the world wanted from him. Björn Andrésen had never seen anything like it. Reporters shouting his name, photographers fighting for a glimpse of his face. In every frame, he looked untouchable, a living sculpture carved by light. But behind those blue eyes was confusion, fear, and a dawning realization. He wasn't being celebrated, he was being consumed. Visconti stood beside him, proud, satisfied. When a journalist asked how he found such a perfect boy, the director smiled. "I didn't find him. I created him." That sentence would echo in Björn's mind for decades, because from that moment on, he stopped being a person. He became property of cinema, of beauty, of fantasy. At the film's premiere, audiences gasped. Mahler's music swelled. Dirk Bogart's eyes followed Tadzio across the sunlit beach, and people wept not for the story, but for the sight of beauty itself. Björn's face became an international obsession overnight. In one evening, a 15-year-old boy was turned into a symbol of erotic melancholy. He smiled for the cameras as his grandmother whispered, "Stand up straight," but inside, he felt smaller than ever. He didn't understand why grown men looked at him that way, or why Visconti kept insisting he attend social events he didn't want to. Then came the night in Venice. A party, a club, laughter too loud, hands too familiar. He said nothing, because in that world, silence was survival. And when the night ended, so did his innocence. The world fell in love with Björn Andrésen, but he would spend the rest of his life trying to fall out of it. After death in Venice, the world couldn't get enough of him, but nowhere was the obsession stronger or stranger than in Japan. When Björn Andrésen landed at Tokyo's Haneda airport, chaos erupted. Thousands of fans screamed his name, waving magazines and photographs of Tadzio. Some cried, others fainted. The police had to form a human chain to escort him through the terminal. In Japan, he wasn't just a movie star. He was a living god, a fantasy sculpted in Nordic perfection. They called him Tadzio-kun. His posters covered department stores, record shops, even cigarette ads. He couldn't walk a single street without hearing his name whispered like a prayer. He recorded songs, appeared in commercials, smiled endlessly for cameras that never blinked. He became the face of a culture that adored purity, fragility, and youth, everything he no longer felt inside. In interviews, he played the role Japan wanted him to play, the soft-spoken, innocent foreign idol. But behind every gentle bow was exhaustion. He once said, "You've seen the pictures of the Beatles in America? It was like that. There was hysteria." Hysteria. That was the perfect word. Because hysteria never loves. It devours. When the lights went off and the fans went home, Björn was alone in a hotel room, staring at a mirror that no longer recognized him. He wasn't sure who looked back, the Swedish boy who lost his mother, or the Japanese idol who belonged to everyone but himself. He had become a reflection, bright, flawless, and utterly hollow. When the screams faded, silence followed. The magazines stopped calling. The posters came down. And for the first time in years, Björn Andrésen could walk down a street without being recognized, but instead of relief, he felt something worse. Emptiness. He returned to Sweden, trying to start over. He played the piano again, took small film roles, wrote music no one listened to. He had the face the world once worshipped, but now it was older, sharper, touched by time. And time, unlike fame, has no mercy. He described his career later with brutal honesty. It's one of the few that started at the absolute top and then worked its way down. He wasn't bitter when he said it, just tired. People still remembered Tadzio, the angelic boy from Death in Venice, but not the man behind him. Producers only wanted that image, the eternal youth frozen in sunlight. No one wanted to see who he'd become. At home, he tried to find normalcy. He married, had 2 children, a daughter, Robin, and a son, Elvin. But tragedy followed him again. His son died at just 9 months old, from sudden infant death syndrome. Björn never spoke much about it. He didn't have to. The pain lived behind his eyes. He drifted through the years, doing theater, teaching music, surviving. The cameras had moved on, but the ghost of his younger self, the boy on the beach, refused to let him go. Every time he looked into a mirror, he still saw Tadzio staring back, and Tadzio never aged. By the early 2000s, Björn Andrésen had become a mystery, a face people remembered but couldn't place, a name buried under nostalgia. And then, in 2003, his image resurfaced without his consent. The feminist writer Germaine Greer released a book titled The Beautiful Boy. Its cover featuring a photograph of Björn at 15, taken by the famous David Bailey. The picture showed him at his most vulnerable, young, flawless, and unaware of the gaze that would follow him for life. When Björn saw it, something inside him snapped. He had been silent for decades, but now he spoke. He publicly objected, saying he was never asked for permission. He said that the book, and the fascination behind it, represented everything that had wounded him since death in Venice. Adult love for adolescence is something I am against in principle, he said, emotionally and intellectually. I am disturbed by it because I know what this kind of love is about. He wasn't just rejecting a book. He was rejecting a culture that had built shrines out of his youth. The publisher refused to apologize. They claimed they needed only the photographer's consent. Legally, they were right. Morally, they were not. For Björn, it wasn't about money or fame anymore. It was about reclaiming something far rarer: dignity. He once said, "The world fell in love with a boy I never was. Now I'm just trying to live as the man I became." And for the first time, he sounded free. For years, Björn Andrésen lived like a ghost, wandering through Stockholm, a man recognized only by those who remembered a boy from a long-forgotten film. Then, in 2019, he returned, not as Tadzio, not as a fantasy, but as a man unafraid to die on screen. Director Ari Aster cast him in Midsummer, a horror masterpiece where sunlight hides madness. Björn played an elderly villager who sacrifices himself calmly, almost gracefully, for his community. And when his character's skull was crushed by a mallet, he smiled afterward and said, "Being killed in a horror movie is every boy's dream." It was the most ironic line of his life. He had spent decades being killed by beauty. Now he was finally allowed to choose how to die. 2 years later came The Most Beautiful Boy in the World, the documentary that stripped away the legend and left only the man. Directed by Christina Lindström and Christian Petri, it was raw, unflinching, and deeply human. For the first time, the audience saw Björn not through Visconti's eyes, but through his own. He talked about his trauma, his loneliness, his lost son, and his anger. He also spoke of forgiveness, not for others, but for himself. "Visconti screwed up my life quite decently," he said with a half-smile. It wasn't bitterness anymore. It was closure. Time had finally caught up with the boy on the beach, and he no longer ran from it. He walked into it head held high, as a survivor of his own legend. On October 25th, 2025, the news broke quietly, almost shyly. Björn Andrésen had died. He was 70 years old. No cause was given. No spectacle. No scandal. Only a few simple words released by Christian Petri and Christina Lindström, the directors who had helped him reclaim his story. "He was a brave person," Lindström said. Brave not because he fought fame, but because he learned to live with it. In Stockholm, the morning light was pale, almost white. A piano sat in the corner of his apartment, its keys slightly out of tune, its lid half open, as if waiting for one more song. The city outside was quiet, and maybe that's how he wanted it. For a man who spent his youth drowning in noise, applause, cameras, whispers, silence, was the truest kind of peace. Some say he died alone. Others believe his daughter, Robine, was nearby. But in truth, Björn had never been alone. He had always been haunted by his mother, his lost son, his younger self on that Venetian beach. Now, at last, all of them were together, in one place, in one silence. The boy who once made death look beautiful had finally met it without fear, without performance, without the camera watching. Just a man, closing his eyes, and letting the world fade to black. When the news faded, there was no chaos, no trending hashtags, no crowds outside his home, just a strange stillness, as if the world finally exhaled after 50 years of holding its breath. Björn Andrésen was gone, but his image remained. The camera had preserved him at 15, forever golden hair, distant eyes, an angel walking by the sea. People still watch Death in Venice and whisper, "That's beauty." But few remember the cost of that beauty, the child behind the myth, the human behind the masterpiece. Visconti gave him immortality, but also imprisonment. He turned a boy into an idea, and the world kept worshipping that idea, long after it destroyed its source. Björn spent his life breaking free from that frame, peeling away every layer of someone else's fantasy until only truth was left. He once said, "Maybe beauty is just a mirror, and some of us are cursed to see what's behind it." That was his wisdom, his warning, and his farewell. Today, his reflection lives not on a poster or in a photograph, but in the uneasy silence of those who finally understand what fame can do to a soul. Björn Andrésen didn't just act in Death in Venice. He lived it. And when he died, the spell finally broke. The most beautiful boy in the world was, at last, free. Fame fades. Beauty dies. But stories like this never go away. Björn Andrésen's face once définit perfection. Now, it defines the price of it. If you've ever looked at a legend and wondered what it cost them to be adored, remember Björn, the boy who became a masterpiece and the man who spent a lifetime escaping it. This is Tragic Hollywood. Subscribe for more stories of brilliance, ruin, and the haunting price of being unforgettable. Because behind every perfect image, there's always a human shadow.